Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Anthony Atwell. Address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
There are many attractions for the tourists in London. Indeed, almost as many attractions as there are tourists, which is something that can be said of no other city, with, of course, the possible exception of Rome. There's Buckingham Palace itself, Clarence House, and the Palace of St. James. There's St. Paul's Cathedral and the Tower of London. There's the Old Bailey, the Law Courts, the British Museum. These to mention only a few. But of all the attractions which London offers, there would surely be none to compare for colour and splendour, for pomp and ceremony, with the changing of the guard. Perhaps the most outstanding feature of this grand old custom is the carriage of the guards themselves. Many is the time I've watched them fascinated, marvelling at their bearing, their capacity to stand at rigid attention, almost without batting an eyelid for hours at a time. Their bearskins or busbies heavy upon their foreheads, their buttons, braid, and boots flashing, be the skies grey or blue. It's a capacity I have yet to see equalled anywhere in the world, and a ceremony that can never be surpassed. Oddly enough, I've been held up in a traffic jam near Buckingham Palace, brought about by the changing of the guard, on the very morning that I was visited here in my office by Sir Robert Atwell, an old friend and fellow club member of mine, whose son I knew to be a member of the Royal Guard, and of whom, needless to say, Sir Robert was extremely proud. He was waiting for me in the outer office when I arrived, and from the look on his face, I knew at once that something was wrong.
Henry, I'm at the end of my tether. You're the one man I know who can help me.
Help you in connection with what?
Oh, my son, Anthony. He's disappeared. Disappeared completely.
I think perhaps you'd best sit down, Robert. Try to relax a little. Perhaps a brandy might help.
Oh, no. I'll be all right. Just a bit upset, you know. It's all come as rather a shock. You've met Anthony, of course?
Yes, a number of times. It must be almost 3 years since I last saw him. Let's see now. I believe it was that day he scored the century for Cambridge against Oxford. Wonderful, not that? I don't recall ever seeing 100 runs put up on that board in quicker time.
Yes, he could have played for England, that boy, if he'd put his mind to it.
Well, there's still time. He's only, 24, 25?
Henry, I don't think you can have heard what I said. I said he's disappeared. Gone.
Yes, I heard you.
Well, then, why talk about cricket? Hang it all, I mean to say.
Because you're quite obviously in a very highly agitated frame of mind. Knowing as well as I do, I realize it's quite useless trying to pry information from you while you're in such a state. Moreover, I'm doing my very best to place the boy in my own mind. Now then, just take things calmly and tell me exactly what's happened. When did he disappear, and how?
It was last week, on the Tuesday afternoon. He was on duty at the palace.
Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
And?
Well, shortly after 3 o'clock, he was found to be missing from his post.
By whom?
One of the constables on duty, who in turn, of course, reported it to a palace official.
He wasn't seen leaving?
Apparently not.
But surely in that uniform he couldn't very well have walked away without being spotted by someone.
Well, that's exactly what he appears to have done. Not in his uniform. His bare skin and coat were later discovered in a sentry box.
Oh.
And of course, whatever happens, it means the end of his career in the Guards. All probability he'll be court-martialed. Perhaps even put in prison.
But the boy may have suffered some form of mental lapse. He might not have been responsible for his actions.
Responsible or not, he'll be held to account for them. No excuse will be taken into consideration. And even if the court-martial's a mere formality, his dismissal will be automatic.
What steps have been taken so far by his superiors?
Oh, none so far as I know, except that he's been posted as a deserter. The matter's been hushed up as much as possible. But it wouldn't surprise me to learn that the civilian authorities have been alerted to be on the lookout for him. There's so much red tape attached to these things, it's quite impossible to know what course they'll adopt.
Tell me a little about the boy. Was he happy in the Guards?
Well, he appeared to be perfectly happy.
How long has he been in the service?
2.5 years.
And his record?
This couldn't have been better.
Now, regarding his personal life, has he suffered any kind of emotional upsets of late?
Not that I know of, no. He got himself involved with some girl a few months ago, but I understood that was all over.
Now, what exactly do you mean by involved?
Well, at one point he was talking of getting engaged. I didn't take it seriously, of course, knowing his weakness for falling in and out of love, but even so, I remember it rather shocked me at the time.
Did you meet this girl?
Yes, once. Brought her home.
Were you impressed or otherwise?
Most decidedly unimpressed. Didn't care for her in the least.
Why not?
Oh, she was showy, for one thing. Oh, intensely attractive. Quite beautiful, in fact. But cheap and rather vulgar. Moreover, she drank far more than was good for her. On this particular occasion, she was 3 parts under.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, not at all the type of girl I'd choose for a daughter-in-law.
Didn't visit you a second time?
Well, certainly not. I told Anthony if she ever set foot in the place again, there'd be the devil to pay.
Well, how did he take that?
Quite well, actually. He was rather put out himself at the way she behaved. Still, he said he didn't blame me for reacting as I did.
Did he continue to keep company with her?
He did. He kept it a secret from me. Never spoke of it again.
I see. Has there been anyone since?
Not as far as I know. Which is quite surprising, really. As I said before, this other creature appeared on the scene. He was forever losing his heart to someone.
When did you last see him before he disappeared?
Only on the previous Sunday. He was off duty, and we took the opportunity of visiting the grave of his mother, God rest her.
How did he seem then?
Very quiet, subdued. In the circumstances, that was natural enough. I was the same way myself. Yeah, poor Vera. I don't think either of us have ever been the same since she died.
Must be 5 years ago now.
Almost 7. Anthony was just 18 at the time.
Have you been seeing much of him lately?
Oh, not a great deal. 2 or 3 times a month, perhaps, no more.
Relations were in no way strained between you.
Oh, not unless he was harbouring a secret grudge regarding me disapproval of Felicia.
Felicia?
Yes, that was her name, Felicia Howarth.
Oh, I see. You haven't thought of checking with her at all, I suppose?
I've been so upset I haven't thought of checking with anyone. Even so, she's the last person I'd approach.
How long have they been keeping company when you met her?
A few months, perhaps not that long. But, you seem to be placing a great deal of importance on what, to my mind, was a relatively trivial affair.
Well, perhaps. It's just that in 9 cases out of 10 of this character, there's always a woman involved.
Oh, come, Henry. Surely you don't have guardsmen disappearing every other day.
The fact that Anthony's a guardsman has no bearing at all on my thoughts at the moment. I'm thinking of him simply as a young man who has, as you yourself said, a very definite susceptibility for the opposite sex.
Hang it all, man, at his age I was much the same.
Not quite.
Eh?
If I recall correctly, at his age, you were married.
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet the right woman.
Exactly. Therein lies the difference. From what you tell me, Anthony has met the wrong one. Following Sir Robert's departure, I sent for Agent Paul Studdy, with whom I discussed the case in detail. As it happened, Studdy was also working on 2 other cases at the same time, both of them, curiously enough, involving young men in roughly the same age group as Anthony Atwell. It was, therefore, only to be expected that he should be very reluctant to take on a third.
Oh, I tell you, Chief, I'm so fed up with these young bloods and their tragic affairs, I feel like jumping off London Bridge.
Well, there's no guarantee whatever that Atwell's disappearance is connected in any sort of way with a love affair. But the indications are certainly present.
You know, I've always wanted to see one of those characters do something crazy.
What characters?
Those bearskin guys, the way they stand there like marble statues. A spaceship from Mars could land right at their feet and they wouldn't turn a hair. I've often been tempted to try tickling one in the ribs.
I wouldn't advise it if I were you. You have to find yourself behind bars very smartly.
That's why I said I'd have liked to have seen this happen. The guy suddenly whip off his coat and top knot, chuck him in the sentry box, and stroll off.
I dare say quite a number of people would have liked to have seen that happen. Fact remains, of course, that no one did. No one we know of, at any rate.
Yeah, I guess he'll really have the book thrown at him when he finally turns up.
Yes, indeed. Very large book at that.
Those boys even get punished for fainting on parade, let alone strolling off and leaving the palace unattended.
Well, not unattended exactly, but less attended than usual. Yes, I imagine he's in for quite a rap over the knuckles, whatever his excuse may be. But for the moment, of course, that's quite beside the point. Our job is to find him regardless. And I think that our best bet is to set the ball rolling by checking with this Howarth girl.
Uh-huh. Who is she exactly?
Well, from what I gather, she comes from quite a prominent family. Her father's a member of Parliament. Her mother's apparently quite closely related to a baronet.
Sounds like she might be a bit of a throwback.
Well, from Sir Robert's description of her, it does indeed. He doesn't know the family at all himself, but he knows of them. And he's heard from a reasonably reliable source that they've broken off all relations with her.
Yeah. Where does she hang out? Any idea?
He seemed to think she had a flat somewhere in Sloane Square, so I checked it in the phone book and, let's see. Oh, yes, here we are. Howarth. Miss Felicia A., 6 Aldershot Mansions, Grover Road. It was a pre-war block, not very far from Sloane Square Station. Taking a lift to the second floor, Studdy made his way along a narrow carpeted passage to a door marked 6 at the far end. In all, he knocked 4 times and was just preparing to retrace his footsteps back along the passage when the door opened and he found himself confronted by a slim young woman in a flame-colored bathrobe. Her dark hair was wet and hung limply at her shoulders. Her feet were bare, and she wore no makeup. Yet there could be no doubting that she was an uncommonly beautiful girl, despite the look of annoyance which clouded her features.
Every time I take a bath, I can count on someone arriving in the middle of it.
Pardon me, it wasn't planned.
Who are you? What do you want?
Well, the name is Studdy. I'm from the Missing Persons Bureau. If you're Felicia Howarth, I want that we should have a few brief minutes of chat.
About what?
Well, a friend of yours, Anthony Atwell.
Oh. Well, in that case, you'd better come in.
Thanks.
Well? What about Anthony?
Seen him around lately?
Not for a week or so. Why?
Because he's missing.
You don't tell me.
Uh-huh. Any idea where he might be?
Not the slightest. But when you find him, you might contact my solicitors.
Uh-huh. Why?
Because I intend suing him, that's why.
Suing him? For what?
Assault.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
Somewhat taken aback, Studdy stared hard at the young woman, who met his gaze unflinchingly, running a carefully manicured hand through her limp hair as she did so, the corners of her mouth registering faint amusement at the agent's obvious surprise.
You look a little shocked, Mr. Studdy.
That's putting it mildly. Assault's a pretty serious charge.
No more serious than the damage he might have done me if he hadn't been stopped when he was.
Stopped by who?
Harry Gordon, a friend of mine. We were walking along the street minding our own business when suddenly Anthony appeared in front of us. He called me a filthy name, then knocked me down. I fell on the pavement and skinned my elbow. It all happened so quickly it was over before I'd had time to draw breath. Then when Harry turned to grab him, he ran away.
Now, when was this?
Last week. Swelling in my jaw's almost gone numb. But you should have seen it a few days ago.
Uh-huh. What day last week?
The Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock.
And, that's when he was found missing from his post.
Well, he wasn't in uniform. Just the trousers and the boots.
Whereabouts did it happen?
In the mall. About halfway along.
Going towards the palace or away from it?
Away from it. We were actually coming from Victoria.
Uh-huh. So you did pass the palace?
Yes.
Did you happen to see Atwell on guard?
Well, I wasn't looking for him.
Obviously, he saw you.
Well, the next time he sees me, it'll be in court.
You and he were pretty chummy at one stage, weren't you?
We went out a bit together, yes.
When was the last time?
Oh, 2, perhaps 3 weeks ago.
Were you seeing each other regularly before that?
Every day.
Now, according to his father, he broke